What's up, everybody? It's your boy B. Scott with the Philadelphia Eagles. I just want to thank you all for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and leave a 5-star rating. Fly, Eagles, fly.
All right, thanks for tuning in to Eagles Brawl of the Brawl Network. However you're tuning in, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, we greatly appreciate you listening today. Joining me right now is FantasyGuru's.com, Tyler Buecher, great writer. I always follow your opinion, and especially during this time, I think I'm going to even lean on more fantasy advice because we don't know what's going to happen with this pandemic going on, and I can only imagine what this does for fantasy projections this year and how it does when you're looking at teams and trying to break down all the projections and stuff like that. Like, has the pandemic hindered anything so far for you when running about fantasy right now?
Thanks for having me on, Connor. I'll just say, right off the bat, it definitely impacts the way we view rookies. We're going to see a lot of rookies and guys that are newly acquired on new teams. I think they'll have slower transitions, and they might start the season off slowly, but they could pick it up in the second half. I think that's going to be the biggest hurdle that we see fantasy-wise.
Right, because let's just roll into I'm going to make this the first question now since you pretty much just hit on majority of what I'm going to ask there. I think all eyes are on Jalen Reagor and how he's going to be in the Eagles' offense his rookie year with, like we said, the pandemic going on and the transition. But I do want to highlight Aaron Moorhead, the new Eagles wide receivers coach, played with his father, Monte Reagor, in Indianapolis. Monte Reagor obviously played for the Philadelphia Eagles. So I feel like there's already at least a background there that most rookie wide receivers aren't going to have with their team. And now he's already working out with Carson Wentz in Houston too. So knowing how the Eagles are a wide receiver, knowing that Deshaun Jackson is probably primed to miss some time this year no matter what. Alshon Jeffrey, I would assume, starts on the PUP. You have to see, with the talent already being not there as is. I know they added Marquise Goodwin. I guess we touch on that a little bit later, but it looks like there's going to be some targets his way no matter what his rookie year at least. And I know that rookie wide receivers especially takes a little bit for them to get into adjustment into the midseason. We usually wait for them to really fantasy boom then. But with the way the Eagles are looking at wide receiver, I would argue they need to see him early. So given all the context of the situation, because I'm a person, when I look at fantasy, I put situation more into it than I do analytics. When you look at the situation now that I described, do you like Jalen Reagor's prospects with the Eagles this year for fantasy projection-wise?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of potential there. I think in general we're going to see a lot of these rookies struggle, as we just alluded to. There's just so many outside factors going on in the world right now. Like, we're recording this mid-June. There's still 3 months until week 1 officially kicks off. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot that can change between now and then. Having some kind of rapport with the wide receivers coach and working out with Wentz is definitely a boon in in the positive direction for him. When it comes to Reagor specifically, though, I think he's definitely a guy you want to keep your eye on in terms of fantasy potential. He's currently going as the wide receiver 54 in FanBall's best ball draft setup. That's an average draft position in the 12th round. That's like wide receiver 5 territory. And when you're looking for wide receivers that are in that kind of stratosphere, like your wide receiver 5, guys that are going to be on your fantasy bench, you're really hunting for upside there. And I think that's something that Reagor absolutely provides. Like, he thrives at TCU as a vertical receiver and in the return game. We've seen historically players that do really well as a return specialist that thrive on special teams translate really well to the NFL level, where that open field ability to make defenders miss translate really well to offensive skill position players. And we saw Reagor do that at a super young age. He was beating up Big 12 competition when he was an 18-year-old freshman. Terrific yards per route run numbers for his sophomore year. Then we got even more involved in the offense. And that's one of PFF's most predictive statistics to identify future success, guys that excel in the yards per route run category. And the Eagles need playmakers on the outside. Like, they're top 10 in vacated targets from last year, and targets are the lifeblood of fantasy football, especially at the receiver position. 128 targets unaccounted for from last year. And I think we see Reagor pick up a good chunk of those. The one thing I want to mention about Reagor that I'm sure you've discussed at length with after the Eagles drafted him, is that we should definitely not take too much stock in his 2019 collegiate stat lines. Like, it was one of the worst quarterbacks thrown to him. PFF charted 30.7% of his targets as catchable, lowest rank in this year's class. So definitely take that 2019 stat line and just kind of like put it in the background and focus more on what he did in 2018 and 2017. Like, we're probably going to need an injury to Deshaun Jackson or Alshon Jeffrey in order to see Reagor hit his ceiling. But, I mean, he's got a very capable quarterback in Carson Wentz. Could definitely see him be one of those rookies that emerges down the stretch, especially towards the back half of the season, as a producer for fantasy squads.
Right, that's what I'm hitting on, really. I think he's going to be a producer sooner rather than later, just because I think also you have to factor into it. He saw his dad play in the NFL, so he knows what it takes, like the preparation that goes into it. That's important for me, especially for a rookie, to already know that lesson and know his expectations to going into the league. I think that's huge. And then another point I want to bring up is Wentz's deep ball continues to get better year after year, to the point where it was ninth in accuracy terms last year, in terms of 21 plus yards thrown. A lot of it was incompletions, but that were accredited to the wide receivers. This is the opportunity where I really see Reagor, and I really want to go back to his 2018 season where a lot of people want to say his hands are iffy, but I thought in 2018 when he saw, I think, 131 targets, he only dropped 4 passes. So I'm not really worried about that. I think you're going to see a guy around I want to say how Odell started out his rookie year with the injury that slowed him, which we can allude that to like the pandemic maybe. When he started hitting his fantasy stride, it was around week 6. I just remember that Falcons game where Odell scored like 3 touchdowns out of nowhere, 2 touchdowns out of nowhere his rookie year. And then everybody started taking notice for him fantasy-wise, and he just took off. Am I crazy for thinking that Reagor could be that type of playmaker or wide receiver this year in the first round, to be that guy that comes into the middle of the season and just booms, and you have to consider him as a flex or a wide receiver too, at least?
Yeah, I think we could definitely see that occur. We know that Wentz isn't a guy that likes to check down in time. Like, he's an aggressive baller. Like, he's a baller in every aspect of the term. And that's what makes him so fun to watch to me. So I think we'll see a guy like Reagor who can win deep. He's incredibly good at separating. And you see it like in his cuts, you see it off the line of scrimmage. Like, those traits I think are going to translate really well to the next level. And there's just going to be a lot of opportunity for him where I don't think we're going to see many rookie wide receivers be fantasy viable this upcoming year, but Reagor is definitely one of them.
Right, and that the huge thing you just hit on there is the separator. The Eagles have not had that really in Wentz's era, besides Torrey Smith, consistently. So at this point, I like his prospects in 12 personnel with Deshaun, Ertz, and Goddard out there. I think that's really plays that the defense isn't going to be focusing on him as much, where he's going to thrive on, just like Goddard does in the situations when the defense is paying attention to Ertz. So I like his fantasy upside a lot. I don't know how, because I know you were really high on Jalen Reagor too when we were talking about him pre-draft, but you couldn't draw up a better situation for him where he got drafted, in my opinion. But another guy that we got to talk about in the Eagles offense who is huge fantasy traction is Miles Sanders. You go back and you look at Christian McCaffrey's rookie season, where I would argue they are comparable, to the fact that McCaffrey had Jonathan Stewart eating to his carries, which I would say at paces throughout the year, it was Jordan Howard when he was healthy, was in the similar type of role. Cam Newton was also running the ball, so you can allude like Wentz running the ball mixed with Boston Scott in there eating Miles Sanders carries. I would argue their rookie years were almost identical, and Sanders had 241 more yards from scrimmage. Can you envision where you have to say, hey, maybe you need to consider Miles Sanders in the first round? I know it sounds crazy, because I think a lot of people are either you're really high on Sanders for fantasy, or you're just taking his rookie year and you're way overreacting with it. But they haven't signed a veteran back. I know Doug favors the committee approach, but it looks like it's going to be 75-25 Sanders and Scott. It looks like from starting right now. And I mean, I would argue their cap space isn't good enough for them to even bring in a veteran running back at this point. So am I crazy for thinking it's time to buy the stock on Sanders and, hey, consider him in like maybe 9 to 12 range in the first round?
Yeah, I mean, you could even argue earlier in some high-stakes leagues. I've seen him go as early as number 3. That feels a little lofty, but if we look back a year from now, maybe it's not. Like, he could find himself year's end in that like top 5, top 6 running back category. And I wouldn't be shocked at all. I'm anticipating a huge year 2 leap for him. We saw the touches pick up as the season progressed. A lot of that was due to Jordan Howard's injury, but I mean, he merited on his own as well. For weeks 13 through 16, he averaged 23.3 touches per game. That's the final month of the fantasy year when teams really needed him, fantasy owners really needed him. And he ended up being just one of 10 backs over the past 20 years to post 50 or more receptions as a rookie. That's what I really like about Sanders, that receiving ability, and that's what drives his fantasy value. Targets are worth 2.75 times more valuable than a rushing carry in full PPR systems. So we love to target those backs that have dual purpose ability in terms of receiving the ball out of the backfield. It just gives multiple options to accrue fantasy points, and I think Sanders is one of those backs that can do that. We also have like this notion, which is where the ADP comes into question, that Philadelphia operates out of a committee backfield. And I mean, if you look solely at the running backs that they've had in recent history under Doug Peterson, like Jordan Howard, Wendell Smallwood, Corey Clement, Josh Adams, Darren Sproles, LeGarrette Blount, none of those backs are really bell cow guys you want to target. Jay Ajayi was probably the closest that they had, but I mean, there were a ton of health and injury concerns there. So he never really achieved that role. Sanders, on the other hand, I think he's the first true 3-down back that the Eagles can heavily deploy. His first year, he had 229 touches as a rookie. No back under the Doug Peterson era has eclipsed that 200 touch mark. And we're projecting, Sanders to exceed that value in 2020. There's a good shot for 300 plus touches. Like you said, it's just Boston Scott to take away touches. We saw a lot of older veteran backs tied to the Eagles, but nothing really came to fruition there. I guess the only back left that you should worry about would be Devonta Freeman, only because he can take away rushing and receiving snaps, which is where Sanders gets most of his value through that receiving work. But, I mean, if we see a 75-25 split with Sanders and Scott and they don't grab anybody, absolutely first-round potential. I like him in the back half of the first round, kind of where Joe Mixon and Derrick Henry are going. I think Sanders could rival those guys as one of those backs that could potentially be a top 6 back by the end of the year.
I mean, you hit on exactly why I think so. It's the dual threat purpose. And the reason why I brought up Christian McCaffrey, I'm not saying Miles Sanders is as good as Christian McCaffrey by many means. I'm saying because Miles Sanders was the Eagles' best vertical threat last year, which is insane for a running back of, especially a rookie one at that, to play that well and be such a vertical element to the game. And now you look at all the speed they added, you can only imagine the receiving opportunities he's going to get in the deep passing yards game too. So to me, I'm buying all the stock on Miles Sanders. I draft him as high. I'm definitely targeting him in the first round. I think the Eagles at this point have to look back in their LaShawn McCoy era and treat it the same way, like 2014 when they had McCoy and Sproles, because Scott's usage, no matter what, I like the role they're going to carve out for him, but it doesn't take away my fantasy relevance with Miles Sanders. It doesn't eat into his fantasy projection at all. You have to have some type of back on the field at some point. But I think the Eagles are in a position where they could even put Clement at the end of the depth chart, put Michael Warren or Adrian Coates at the end of the depth chart, and have a successful rushing attack no matter what with Sanders involved. Huge year 2 leap for him. I'm glad you're on the same page as me as well with that. I see some people I see fantasy Twitter either says temper your expectations, this is how the Eagles do stuff, that something's going to happen, or some people are just like, yeah, you need to take him right away in the first round. So I'm definitely on the first round side. I'm glad you are too. But another guy that we can talk about Zach Ertz, but I think we already know he's a primary target for fantasy tight ends. And either if you're not taking Kelsey, you're not taking Kittle, you're probably taking Ertz. So I think everybody knows that by now. But for me, is Dallas Goedert. I wonder what his ADP is now with all the speed the Eagles have added. I think he's never experienced that. So it opens up way more opportunities for him to expose the holes in zone coverage, get the weaker link on him. You look at what Brent Selleck and Trey Burton did in 2017, and the Eagles don't really have that. That third tight end is Josh Perkins, who I don't think plays a fantasy relevance here. You can really envision a really, really strong touchdown year for Goddard, in my opinion. So what do you think on that one?
Yeah, the question for me is going to be like volatility. Like fantasy football is a week-to-week game. We need to approach it like that. Like I think when you look back at the year Dallas Goedert had last year, he had 87 targets, 58 receptions, 607 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Each one of those marks ranked second on the Eagles behind only Ertz, and it led to Goddard finishing as the fantasy tight end 10. I'm not sure how active you've been in drafts so far, but like they've kind of been divided in the haves and the have-nots with like several tiers emerging at the position. Like tier 1 being Kelsey and Kittle. They're typically going round 2. Tier 2 is Ertz and Mark Andrews. They're typically going round 4. Tier 3 of Darren Waller, Evan Ingram, Tyler Higbee, Hunter Henry. Those are round 6 to 8. And then once you get to tier 4, it's pretty much no man's land with about 10 different tight ends all vying to get inside that like top 12 fantasy producer finish. And there's only 20 picks that separate the tight end 9 from the tight end 16. So they're all going close together in this cluster. And Goddard's right in that mix at tight end 15 right now. Again, remember, he finished last year as tight end 10. So he's going a little bit behind where he finished last year. And I think a good question here is how you project the Eagles to play offensively, like a chicken versus egg debate. Did the Eagles run their heavy 12 personnel last year, 52% of the time, a league-leading rate, because of it was the most effective way they moved the ball, or was it because out of necessity when all those injuries they faced through the wideout? Like I remember Josh McCown asking for wide receiver reps at one point just because they were so low at healthy wideouts and needed a body there. Either way, it led to Wentz targeting the tight end 38.9% of the time. Only the Ravens targeted their tight ends more. So there's definitely like a lot of meat on the bone for Ertz and Goddard to succeed. I just question the week-to-week output you'll get from Goddard. I just think it's going to be a little bit more variable than most fantasy owners want, or most Eagles fans want. I'll say that. I think it's going to be a much better served as like a best ball option where you only get those good weeks plugged into your lineup.
See, for me, I think they have to put their best players on the field, and you at this point, you still have to say Goddard's their second best receiving weapon on that team because I can't count on Deshaun at this point. We can't count on Alshon, and even if we did, you already know the deep decline he's already going in right now.
Mm-hmm.
Another guy that
you see another year of heavy 12 personnel then.
I do because you have to have your best players on the field, and this. I mean, I know they added speed. But like we said, we have to temper the expectations with rookies, and most of their speed's coming from rookies. And Marquise Goodwin doesn't have a strong bill of health either, and we haven't seen a consistent season from him in a long time either. I don't see how they can shy away from it. I see that they have more options now, I guess you can say. But I don't see how they can shy away from it. And you just can't keep Goddard off the field. Too much draft capital there to keep him off the field. Too much invested in him in the offense to keep him off the field. He could be numerous teams' number one tight end right now. So they can't keep him off the field. So I think it's going to be around the I don't want to say 52%. I think it's going to be a little bit lower just because they have to put some of these guys, the speed guys on the field at all times. Everybody's got to be speed. For the 4 wide receiver sets, I would think they're going to take advantage of this year. I still want to say it's around 49, 48 at least percent that they run 12 personnel. So that's why I'm trying to see what you think about that because – I mean, we did see in 2017. I thought Burton really – that's when we all started getting to know Trey Burton. That's when the Chicago Bears started eyeing Trey Burton. Mm-hmm. And then Brent Selleck was involved too. And it was really red zone opportunities, but he was still involved. I'm trying to think. Like maybe he had 5 touchdowns last year. If it goes – because I can just remember so many times watching all 22 film on the Eagles and their red zone opportunities that Wentz just misses Goddard wide open in the end zone. So – I wouldn't be surprised if he scores around 8 to 10 touchdowns. I think it can happen. I think it's a really possibility with all the speed they have added.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. Like you said, I think the biggest question is how much, or if they even do reduce their 2 tight end sets, because 20% was the league average last year. Only 3 teams were above 30%. So like them getting that 50% benchmark is just ridiculously high. But it just comes down to the weapons, and I think we'll see Peterson go to what works. I think I'm with you there, but like I said, for regular redraft leagues, I think you're playing with fire if you're trying to wait for Goddard. I'd probably be a little bit more aggressive and try to get one of those like top 4 tight ends.
I agree with you for sure there. I deeply agree with that, but it's just – there's so many times where you get stuck in the wide receivers and you're drafting that. You want to have that 2 running back thing where you get to the point where you're like, crap, man, there's no tight ends left on the board. Who should I go with? I mean, at that point, I'm guessing, what is Hayden Hurst out of curiosity? Where are we projecting Hayden Hurst right now, if you know?
I believe he's in that mix. I think he's tight end like 11 or so right now.
11? Well, I thought he'd been a little bit higher than that because Matt Ryan.
Tight end 11, yep.
So, okay, if I'm in that area, then that's probably the guy I'm going to take over Dallas Goedert, obviously, because of the snaps he's looking at. But, I mean, we'll see, because you would think with the Eagles, I don't know how much you are with sets and everything, but you would think how they're not really settled at the X wide receiver position. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, I obviously know fantasy relevance this year. If he's going to be a waiver wire pickup if he even shows anything. Maybe they move with all this, because I look at it years past. Nelson Aguilar can only perform well in the slot. Jordan Matthews can only perform well in the slot. They always couldn't mismatch and put guys in different spots now. Now I'm thinking you're going to see Deshaun in the slot. Now I'm thinking you're going to see Reagor in the slot. Maybe Goodwin if he makes the team in the slot. Maybe you move Ertz in the slot and also play him at the X position so that I would assume increases targets. Where are you putting Ertz? In the Kittle, Kelsey conversation, Mark Andrews conversation? I know that you said he's in tier 2, but where are you personally with thinking now the Eagles have all this speed that Ertz obviously needs to get the stuff underneath, and he's been struggling to get the last 2 years? What's going through your mind with this one? So you're looking at Kelsey's prospects. I would probably say, in my opinion, Kelsey number 1. Kittle, I have to still keep number 2 no matter what. It's just the San Francisco's offense. I would argue maybe make Kittle number 1 and Kelsey number 2. But I would still say Ertz is number 3 no matter what on that board. Are you on the same page with that, or do you think you can put him a little higher than those guys?
I think he's a lot closer to Andrews than he is to Kelsey and Kittle. Kelsey and Kittle are both going easily in the round 2 of drafts that I've been doing. Andrews and Ertz, they're back in round 4, but they're only separated by 4 picks on average. So they're going pretty much neck and neck. The way I'm viewing it is if you're playing in a tight end premium league where you get 1.5 PPR receptions for the tight end position, that's when I'd target Ertz over Andrews, because I view Ertz as a guy that will see a lot more receptions, and that's where it pays off in spades. Andrews is going to see a lot of that volume vacated by Hayden Hurst. I think he has a good shot at double-digit touchdowns as well. I like him in other formats, all other formats. But if you're playing in a tight end premium, I'd use that as the tiebreaker between Ertz and Andrews. I think that's going to be an interesting ADP battle as we move through the offseason.
I agree with you there. And now let's just roll into it. I'll talk about him first, and then we'll get into Marquise Goodwin after him. Deshaun Jackson. I know last year was tough, but we saw what week 1 happened, and you would have to think if he's healthy for at least 12 games and he plays like he did week 1, we're looking at a big year from Deshaun Jackson.
Yeah, week 1 was a lot of fun, especially if you played him in any kind of like deal.
I did. I started him. I went to that game, and I was like, I'm going to start Deshaun because I went to this game in my flex. And whoop!
Absolutely. Yeah, he has great history and splits against former teams. He loves that revenge narrative.
Yep, that's exactly. Yep.
But, I mean, his age and his injury concerns, it's caused him to slide down to round 13 of drafts. That's a round after Reagor right now. There's a lot of concerns with Deshaun Jackson, though. He's played 15 or more games just once over the past 5 years. He scored more than 20 fantasy points just 7 times in those 53 games during that 5-year span. So we're not seeing those ceiling games on a routine basis. I mean, they're fun when they occur, but
right, way more bust than boom with Deshaun Jackson in fantasy right now.
I mean, at this point, I'll continue to root for him on Sundays because he's so fun to watch. But I won't be taking him in any of your typical redraft leagues. I think you just save him for DFS or for best ball.
I would definitely agree with the DFS part for sure. It's way too much Buster been with him. I completely agree. That's why I do like Reagor's prospects more than I do like Deshaun's this year. Mm-hmm. I mean, Goodwin is a flyer guy for sure.
Yeah, nothing more than that.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, we don't even have to go way more into him than that. I mean, nice speed and all, but I don't know if you noticed, a lot of Eagles Twitter loves him. And I'm like, I'm not even sure he makes the team right now. Like, I'm glad they added speed, and I'm glad they added a veteran if they need one, because we saw where the Eagles been at since Torrey Smith left with speed position. But I don't think he has any fantasy relevance going into the fantasy draft this year either. And maybe if filler in for 1 week if all your wide receivers on a bye, I don't know. I don't think anything of him either this year. But Carson Wentz, we saw what he did in 2017, didn't even play a full season with the offense the way it was constructed then. On paper, with all the playmaking they've added, with the addition, with already having Ertz and Goddard, who we already know how great of tight ends they are. Even if you get Deshaun for about 65% of the snaps this year, that looks like a pretty big year for Carson Wentz production-wise. Where's his fantasy prospects to you?
Yeah, absolutely. That 2017 season, he was second in fantasy points per dropback. Dude absolutely lit it up. He's been top 10 fantasy producer in 2 of the last 3 years. He wasn't in 2018. But he plays behind one of the league's top offensive lines. They prioritize adding speed, as we've talked about throughout this pod. Definitely used to help spread defenses vertically and let those tight ends and backs operate underneath. I think this Eagles offense is also one that's going to be up in pace. They were number 1 in plays per game last year, and they passed the ball at an above average clip, especially when they're in like situation neutral game scripts. Those are games within plus or minus 8 points. That could lead to a significant amount of volume for Wentz. And when he last had those healthy receivers in 2017, when he was like a near MVP candidate prior to injury, he had 20 plus fantasy points in 10 of 13 starts. Like, the guy just lights it up, has such a high floor, such a high ceiling, and he checks the most important box in fantasy in terms of value. He's coming off the board right now as the fantasy QB 9. That's right in round 10. That lets you load up at the skill position players with your first 9 picks, and then you turn to a quarterback like Wentz with a sky-high potential. He's one of my favorite value plays right now at the QB position, just because he provides such a great floor and ceiling combination. Not many players at that ADP provide what Wentz can do.
And injuries don't concern you?
No, if you have an injury, you can just hit the waiver wire for a replacement.
I agree with you.
I'm not a fan of ever backing up a quarterback in fantasy.
Never mind. I never do it. It's a waste of a roster spot. Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. But am I crazy for thinking that he can throw at least 42 touchdowns?
That's a lot.
That's a lot. I know. That is a lot. But if he stayed healthy, that 2017, he was on pace, I think, 40. So
he has one of the best red zone touchdown rates too.
Exactly. Yeah, I love his red zone touchdown rates, and I mean, I know the Eagles have been a productive running team under Doug Peterson with below average running backs up to the point of Miles Sanders now, but with that rushing attack, that's probably going to finish within the top 5. I would imagine, at the very least, top 10. I like those red zone opportunities, picking up a lot more for Wentz, and obviously we already know he thrives in there.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else you have your eye on for the Eagles offense this year?
Boston Scott, if you're playing like a risky zero RB approach where you're just hoping for late backs to emerge, because we talked about it, it's pretty much going to be the Sanders show. If Sanders gets injured, Boston Scott could do what we saw him do week 17 and through the playoffs. The guy has a lot of potential. Really, really like his receiving skill set. If you're looking for a back to get in the double-digit rounds as like your RB5, I think Boston Scott could be someone to stash.
He's going to be a vulture, I think, for sure, because they do like him around the goal line, and I don't see that role disappearing anytime soon, because you look at Darren Sproles' role the last couple of years of the Eagles when Doug Peterson has him and he is healthy. It's the short yardage stuff. It's the bruising stuff, the goal line opportunities. That's the only thing that I worry about Miles Sanders, if the rushing touchdowns might not be all the way there with Sanders, because Scott's going to come in and get those goal line opportunities and vulture him away. So that does have some fantasy upside to me. But just from your perspective, go back last year, since we're talking about rookie wide receivers now. We talked about Reagor. Go back last year. What was your mind thinking of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside going into that season before we saw what obviously was a very, very disappointing rookie season? What was your thought process for him last year, and do you think he could get back to that point this year with maybe being healthy, maybe being more adjusted to the NFL? Because, I mean, I think you and I both know Pac-12 wide receivers have a tough transition normally to the NFL. Just what do you think? Yeah,
I remember entering the league that he was renounced for his contested catch ability. Mm-hmm. And there's two sides to that. The first being, it's great that he's able to win those 50-50 jump balls and come down with the balls when defenders are close by. The second part is, why are those defenders so close? Is he unable to gain that separation and the little nuances of being a receiver to extend and get the ball away from the defender, and that's the lingering issue I have. Is I think that's a physical trait that's not quite there yet for Arcega-Whiteside, and I'm not going to be approaching him in fantasy whatsoever this year.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't at all. So that's my problem. What I had with him coming in, I said, yeah, that's nice and all that he wins jump ball opportunities, but in the NFL, that's completely different. Especially when considering the Pac-12 that barely plays press coverage as is. The fact that he was getting all these jump ball opportunities in that conference made me think like, I'm not really sure about this guy. Nice stats in the Pac-12 that plays mostly zone, and you're telling me he's so great in this jump ball opportunity. He came in the NFL, and those opportunities weren't coming his way that easily as they were at Stanford. A lot of people kill me on Twitter for being so down on him, but yeah, there's no way I consider him fantasy this year. I don't think he's going to pan out. I just don't. I don't think that's the type of wide receiver that lasts in this type of NFL. I mean, I don't know if you remember Riley Cooper, our old friend back from Florida, on there, but I think that's the type of wide receiver he is, and that's the type of caliber wide receiver he is. But yeah, no fantasy relevance for me whatsoever this year. But I'm sure some people would want to figure out what you thought about him going into year two. But
expectations.
Yeah, I would. I mean, you already know my opinion about it. I don't know.
He had a golden opportunity last year with all those injuries, and the fact that's the most frustrating part.
I'm glad you said that because a lot of people want to give him like slack for that. He had to learn. They're like, so he had to learn so many positions. But I'm thinking, what NFL wide receivers not asked to play multiple positions? That's how the league works. That's how they want to make the league work. That's how mismatches work. That's how opportunities come. I don't think that's a valid excuse. And then, I mean, you could say injuries, but I don't know the situation. All I know is he was healthy enough to play and they addressed him. I don't know what to think of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside at this point, and I don't think the Eagles are really leaning on him that much either. Acquiring 4 wide receivers, even if they're a different skill set than him, doesn't mean they won't get rid of him for them. Have you paid attention to any of John Hightower and Quez Watkins?
Not a ton. Just they just haven't approached the fantasy radar, and that's kind of where my mindset is right now.
Right, and I mean, I wouldn't expect them to with being low end-round picks, but I mean, the one guy I'd probably say that I mentioned there that I could see maybe having some fantasy relevance if anybody gets injured, probably be John Hightower, because he reminds me so much of John Brown, and I mean, vertical threats, speed threats are always fun to have on your stash or your fantasy bench. So maybe if injuries happen like they did last year, something happened like that. But when Alshon, let's just, for argument's sake, let's just say he starts on PUP and he comes back mid-season. Obviously, you don't start him right away or even consider putting him in your starting lineup. He's probably going to be a free agent. Anyways, do you think, like, hey, maybe there's some chance, like, with all the speed I added and with all everybody being focused on Goddard, Ertz, and Deshaun and Reagor's going off at this time, maybe Alshon comes in and gets some kind of fantasy production? Because we did see when they played Miami a glimpse of when they go pass heavy what Alshon can benefit from. Anything on that?
He's just a really risky pick right now. Wide receiver 64 right now. So most drafters are not really that interested in him. He's going as a wide receiver 6 for some kind of perspective there. I don't know, to be honest. And there's just so many question marks with him and his health as well. He's another guy who has rarely put together full healthy seasons. It's been like, I think, 5+ seasons for him as well since he's played 16 games. So it's not a guy that I want to invest in just because I think the cliff for his archetype of wide receiver is a steep one. And I think he's kind of already there.
Last thing before we let you go that I want to just touch on, that not from really a fantasy perspective, because I don't know if you have like fun with thinking this type of stuff in your head like I do, but the Eagles drafted Jalen Hurts in the 2nd round. Everybody sitting there like jaw dropped, like, what? I can't back it up. I can't even say it was a good pick. I thought it was the wrong move. Still do to this day. But immediately the reports come out that they want to use him in a Taysom Hill type role. I know you're not people are, now that we get to have Taysom Hill in the flex, I guess now is the big thing for fantasy. But is there any way you're sitting here thinking the Eagles can use Jalen Hurts in that same way?
So I think he has incredible upside. Like, if a team wants to devote all of their resources, they'll have to go like all in on it. Similar to what we saw the Ravens do with Lamar Jackson. They were still in that Joe Flacco year, his rookie season, and he didn't really get to play until the very end. But that offseason, they transitioned fully into a Lamar-first offense. And I think that's what we're going to need to see Jalen Hurts thrive. He doesn't have that elite processing speed. He has a longer windup for like deeper throws. But he also has ridiculous upside in terms of fantasy potential to join that cohort of like Cam Newton and Lamar Jackson, just guys that produce a ton of rushing production on the ground. And I really, really like this guy. I was just really upset to see him go to a place where there was already an established quarterback like Wentz.
Right. I don't hate the player. I hate the pick because it just doesn't. I don't see where you ever get your worth from that second round pick, that premium pick back in Jalen Hurts. But if Wentz goes down, you look back at when the Eagles were running the RPOs heavily with Nick Foles and the Chip Kelly type concepts. If you were to say, because now I can tell that you're really in on Jalen Hurts and you know what you're talking about with him, can you imagine him and his ability running that RPO type system the way Nick Foles did, though? Can you imagine that?
Wheels up. It's going to be fun.
I think it would be great. I mean, you look at Alabama, where you could really go back to that the RPO type thing. Given the NFL caliber wide receiver, I mean, he did have it there too, but you know what I mean. And then, I can only imagine. Let's just for fun. Do you think if Wentz goes down, they switch the whole RPO type system, they build they do complete offensive in mind of Jalen Hurts and his ability? Do you think they can still win?
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles have arguably some of the most athletic offensive linemen. Like, these guys can definitely move out in space and pull and trap and do all that kind of stuff. I think there's a lot of potential if Hurts were to see extended time and not just, like, be a fourth quarter fill-in. Like, for him to get in the groove and, like, play a full game, play a couple games, I think he could do some serious damage. And we might not see lofty passing totals, but I think we could still see a lot of points on the board by the Eagles as they have a ridiculous amount of potential, and they have a lot of skill position players too for Hurts to target.
All right, then just to end this on Hurts, and we'll end the show here. I want to go back in time because they brought Marty Morningwing back, and you have to think there has to be some reason why they want his voice in the room. There has to be some reason why they think using a second-round pick on Hurts will end up being worth it. You look at Morningwing when he's on the Eagles staff, and they had Vic and McNabb at the same time, and they tried to do the Wildcat stuff, and didn't really work, I would say. Then you go back to when Joe Flacco, his last year as a starter, and you brought up with Lamar coming in a little bit. It was kind of the same thing, and who's the culprit being behind those plays? Morningwing again there as well. Do you think, like, hey, maybe the Eagles insert Hurts on the field at the same time as Wentz at any point in the year?
Yeah, I just don't think it will be very effective.
Yeah, I don't think it will be. It just ruins the pace.
Absolutely.
That's what I hated about it in 2009 when they did that. It just completely killed drives. It ruined the pace of the game. I'm hoping that's not what they're thinking again, but I just think they love that element of surprise, and they love their quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think it's just a case of them like outsmarting themselves. Like we see it with the Saints all the time with Taysom Hill, and they get in the red zone, and it doesn't always translate to touchdowns. And I think we could see that same thing falter for the Eagles if they try to heavily use Hurts as that kind of weapon. I think it'd just be a lot smarter to use Wentz and let him rack up the scores.
I agree with you, but Tyler Buecher and FantasyGuru's.com. Anything else you want to add? So tell us where we can find your work so we can subscribe. I've been having a subscription the last 2 years, so we're all good there. But let's everybody else know about it. So, because I got a lot of information about the Eagles, but there's a lot more than just the Eagles you do. So go ahead and give everybody where we can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm over at FantasyGuru.com. We just launched our 2020 Fantasy Football Draft Guide. It's a digital version where we continuously update with more and more links as the offseason progresses, add more and more information. So when you compare it to like your typical hardcover magazine that's printed out in the month of May or June, it's already outdated a month later. We'll continue to update our draft guide as things go on. Plenty of good content there. Really proud of the work we're doing. And come check us out.
All right, Tyler. I greatly appreciate you coming on the Eagles Brawl. You were on me with Just Another Football podcast, too, when we did that little mock draft. You killed it then. You killed it now. Hot to have you on during the season so we can get some should I start him, should I bench him type of things going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Of course, Tyler. Thanks for coming on.